right. Welcome everyone as we're coming into the Stubborn Praise space. We have people who are filtering into the webinar slowly but surely. And as you join us, feel free to say hello. Feel free to let us know where you're zooming from and perhaps even what the weather's like. It's really lovely here in Vermont.
And I'm just changing our settings so that everyone should be able to chat with everyone. There.
So chat should be enabled, yes.
There they come. I am Rita and Robbie.
Lots of our California folks here. Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining us, so good to have you with us. I always love seeing all the places that people are from. New Orleans, Ohio, Missouri, more California folks. Hi, Shelly. Hi, Lisa from Boston area. Folks, Utah, Wisconsin.
We've got the whole country covered.
I think we do. I think we do. Every state represented.
Hello, sweet people. Thanks, Janice.
Mm.
And it's 1.5 hours from Rita. Thanks for asking.
Yep. But if you need to scoot earlier, that's always allowed. We'll send out the recording probably sometime late tomorrow for any of those who can't stay the whole time. Louisiana. I hadn't seen Louisiana yet. And just a quick reminder to everyone, if you want your chat to show up for everyone, you'll have to change that in the bottom right-hand corner whenever you do that. All right. Well, it looks like we're holding steady, so I think we should just go ahead and get started. Yeah?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to this program, Stubborn Praise, as we call it. I'm James Cruz, as most of you probably know, and this is Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. And we're so glad to be with you today. We thought that we would focus on the theme of regenerating joy, which like you, I too am fascinated to see where this might go. I have no idea. But we have some poems that we'll share. As always, we'll be sharing conversation. And and I do apologize. I'm a little under the weather right now. So if I have to mute myself at any point, you'll know I'll come right back. My voice is holding steady. So I think we're in a good spot. So welcome, Rosemerry.
Hey, James. Hi. For those of you who haven't been with us before, welcome. We've been doing it for a few years, since 2020, I think, and on and off. And just a chance, stubborn praise, the sense of things are not always easy, and honoring that they are not easy, and still in noticing that there is a potential for praise, for falling in love with the world. Or even, as we're going to talk about tonight, regenerating joy. I had thought of that in part. I had suggested regeneration just because of May Day. And I was thinking about, it as a festival, the Festival of Beltane, which is the Gaelic festival, and all of the traditions around this time of year, which I don't know, I'll maybe talk about a little bit as we go along, but I was wrong about something. I was thinking that it was a celebration really of the earth and the plants, but it's actually more about the livestock. I didn't
Mm,
know that this was the first day of summer for the the people who were celebrating Beltane, the Gaelics, and in fact, it was the first day of summer, and this is when it would signal that it was time to put your cattle out and your other
mm,
livestock out, and they would build these bonfires, and they would make the cattle go over the bonfires so that the fairies wouldn't steal their milk. And it was I just love thinking about what was happening. Of course, thinking also then about maypoles and this kind of celebration energy. And then you added the word joy.
mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that this time of year is filled with joy for me because actually, probably like you, for us here, it is about celebrating the plants and life returning to this northern place where it takes a long time for spring to finally happen. I was just looking out at the light coming through the very beginnings of the leaves, chartreuse, like lime green kind of color. And there's no color like that. It just does something really special to the sunshine. And I'm just walking around noticing all the wildflowers lately that are still coming, still making their way upward from the leaf litter. And so to me, it is about the joy of renewal, the joy of returning to life after a long sleep or a long kind of hibernation period, which is kind of what winter feels like to me. Even if there's a lot of activity, it always feels like, there's an inward hibernation that's going on. And then when all the plants start emerging, which my husband is obsessed with them. So Brad was out all day today planting, replanting, digging up some violets. We noticed these little violets that have been growing all around. And so I think I'll share a poem about some of the little flowers that we were going to plant. This was written last year. And so this is about the bluebells, which are now in the ground and now beautifully blooming. And so this is called Bluebells. Before we go inside for the night, he insists I visit the plastic pots which hold the Virginia bluebells he will soon plant in the yard. And so I do, kneeling in gravel, examining the buds which begin as purple nubs, then open into blue blossoms so bell-like I expect them to ring as I reach out and touch each one. With dusk coming on and dinner yet to be made, the man I love asking, "Aren't they beautiful?" and me nodding to the flowers, and the trees bursting lime green above us, and ferns uncurling after a long winter sleep, each cluster of fronds like dancers holding still in mid pose. My yes, now including everything alive and waking up on this spring day like no other.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I thought I would share a bunch of poems tonight from my new book that's coming out in the fall. It's called Unlocking the Heart. And I did a search for joy in the book. You can kind of see all the occurrences of the word joy. There were 77
Oh.
references to the word joy because it's poems and essays as well. So if joy is mentioned in the poem, then I'm talking about joy several times in the prose that comes afterwards. So 77 times. I was like, wow, that's a lot of
That's a lot
joy.
of joy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of joy. And
Yeah.
that poem, James, really touched it, right? I mean, the sensuality of that poem, which actually, by the way, joy from the French, and it means not just any delight, but a sensual delight, like a delight that we bring into our bodies. And the embodiment in that poem, you're literally on your knees and you're
Mm,
bringing in the world, just receiving all this beauty. Uh, and then to say, what you're noticing, the color, and you're noticing the shape, and you're noticing, what else is here. The lens goes from just the flowers to, the man, to the umbel of the green leaves above you, and just until you go all the way out. What is it you say? Yes, not just to this, but to everything that's alive.
mhm,
Just how that, so often I think joy works this way, that it might begin with just this flower.
mhm,
It's like the stepping stone, or the doorway, the portal into more, into a more expansive joy, or if not more expansive, just a more inclusive joy.
mhm.
Noticing what else.
Yeah. Expansive felt right to me. It's like, the poem kind of goes wide, like you're saying, looking at everything alive. And I'd forgotten that I mentioned the ferns too, got those little things in there uncurling like the dancers. But it feels like an expansion, I think, in the body too, because I love that you're pointing out that it's the French word actually means a sensual or bodily delight. That's what joy is. I didn't know that. And that feels absolutely true, that it does place us back into the body. And there's something, at least for me, I'm sure this is true with animals, pets and everything, but just noticing the plants struggling up, out of the winter earth. It's somehow, I don't know, there's this like reaching or empathy that happens in me that when I'm seeing them, I'm feeling my own kind of emergence and and just feeling it with them, I guess, shrugging off those layers and saying yes to the everything that we all have to say yes to, which is part of joy, which is, the light, the warmth, the cold nights, the possible frost, all that
Yeah.
bundled into one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that strikes me about your poem is how it's shared, right? How Brad comes and says, "Hey, hey, come look at this."
Mhm.
And then, actually I love when this happens in your poems. I think, Brad comes with this invitation, "Isn't it beautiful? Do you see this?"
Mm,
Just and how I think there is, perhaps, and maybe we'll talk about it more or see it in other poems, but there can be joy, I think, just ourselves
mm,
in a singular experience.
for sure.
If you yourself were sitting there alone with the bluebells, I have no doubt that joy was possible,
Mhm.
or even in your case, probable. But then to share it with another person, to allow that experience to be, he brought you in, and you know, this swirling of joy, this giving back and forth of joy, this generosity of joy.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was going to say too, a lot of my poems or even essays are about Brad, my husband, like calling me to joy. I want to say that sometimes I'm calling him to joy too. So it does happen that way, but I think it maybe stays with us more when we get, whether it's another person or another, being or just something that really strikes us, a bit of awe. Like it stays with us more if we've been in a certain mode, like I was in a rush to get dinner started, get the night, going onward. And he said, "Oh no, wait, pause, stop." And I came out of that mode into sort of a different way of being
Mm.
for, those few minutes we were with the Bluebells. And I think when we break from where we have been into a different way of being, it tends to stick with us more. At least for me, I feel like it's a learning experience then.
Right. That transition, that opposite, that tension, even of when we're in one state, and then in the opportunity to see another.
Yeah, good way to put it. The tension between, and it's like the tension, the contrast. It's like, oh, wow, this joy, this attention, this noticing is so much better
Mhm.
than being rushed. They're just like, I gotta get those vegetables chopped or, whatever it is.
Gotta get that done. Although just today, by the way, and yesterday too, I'm teaching a class on one of your books, dear man. I thought I brought it. Oh yeah, here it is. If you don't yet have this gorgeous book, well, I'm guessing
Mm,
a lot of you do, but I'm teaching a class right now on the path to kindness and poems from it. And you mentioned, this chopping vegetables, and several of the poems in this book, in fact, one that we talked about today, talk about the joy that we might find in these very daily chores,
mm,
folding laundry, for instance. And lots of students, today found all kinds of ways to find joy and share kindness and, do these
mm.
daily tasks with real intention. And if not in actuality, at least in potential.
Right.
Aspirationally,
Yeah.
we might be able to at least remind ourselves of, oh yes, joy in the chopping of vegetables, even if sometimes it feels more chore-ish.
Mhm. It's a good word, chorish.
Well, let's see. I have a spring poem. I thought I'd start with this one from from All the Honey, and it's called May Morning, because it's May, because it is May. May morning. Just after sunrise, I hear it, the bright, airy trill of the red-winged blackbird. And before my eyes are even open, I feel a wild resonance with the waking world. The certainty I belong to this day, with its rising sun and scent of green grass, its breeze reaching in through the screens. I belong to this day with my creature heart that already this morning longs to hold what it cannot, longs to comfort others, even knowing how sorrow must be felt. I belong to the song of the red-winged blackbird as it calls out again, belong to the silence as he waits for an answer and waits and waits. I belong to the spring every bit as much as I belong to winter. This is perhaps the conundrum of love. No matter how strong the ache, we still belong to the world of beauty, this world that calls to us even in our sleep, wakes us with a promise strung like audible garland across the dawn. You belong. You belong.
Mm. I
Burp.
love that poem. We have a lot of red-winged blackbirds, so I'm really feeling everything that you're talking about. The audible garland. I really loved that. I hadn't noticed it, of course, because I don't know if I've heard you read that one out loud, but the kind of rhyme with dawn and belong
Mm.
that is really highlighted because belong is repeated twice. Um, yeah, there's just so much to love there. And it just made me think about the idea of belonging to the world, belonging to beauty, or even perhaps belonging to joy. And, we think of ourselves perhaps as belonging to a family, belonging to groups, or belonging to another person. But what would it be like to say, like, oh, I belong to joy. I belong to this joy that I'm feeling right now, even as sorrow exists beside it or sort of waits in the wings and we know it'll rise again. It's like, no, I belong to this. Just makes me, it's such a rich word, belonging.
It is a rich, and don't we want that? I mean, I feel
Yes.
like it's such an essential part of our humanity, right? To know that we belong, we belong to a family, or we belong to a group of friends, or we belong. I mean, I think about how abused it can be, belonging,
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
who want to belong to a group and for the sake of belonging will sacrifice their values, will sacrifice their mm, well, I I notice how important it is. I notice how this longing to belong will drive us. Then how essential it is to know that we do belong, in a most basic foundational way to the earth itself, which, but I think the more we trust that belonging, the harder it is to not want to take care of the earth, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah, I'm just thinking like, does it mean is what we're really talking about belonging completely to yourself
Yeah,
and, staying in touch with the body, the mind, the heart, all of it at once, the soul, um, truly belonging to ourselves so that we're never separated from any part of the world, whether that be the earth or another person
right.
or, the things that we create. I know we have many other poets and writers with us. It's like, to belong to ourselves, I think, is to try to exist and create without any sort of barrier um, between us and what we write, what we create, what we give, what we do, so that even there, even though it may not be a reality all the time, doing the laundry contains the possibility of just presence and full joy. I think in almost every single one of my anthologies, there's a poem about doing the laundry because I still want to believe that there can be more joy, even though I will let the clothes sit in the dryer for days before I fold them because I do not want to finish the laundry. Um, so I still want to believe it's possible. If any of you out there have poems about laundry, please send them my way. Joyful poems about laundry.
Joyful poems about laundry. I do want to say, by the way, friends, if you have an actual question for us to address, we do plan to open it up for questions toward the end of our program. But along the way, if you do have, Deborah says she loves doing laundry. If you do have questions along the way, please do put them in the Q&A, which is a bar you should see that at the bottom of your screen. And that way they won't be lost in the chat bar, which we may or may not catch a question there, but we'll definitely see it if you put it in the Q&A section. I want to ask you though, James, I want to go back to something that you just said about the lack of separation between us and what we're writing.
Mm,
Um, I know that this is something that's important to me too, and increasingly important maybe to have less and less filter,
yeah,
between me and the art, to mm, feel less in the way, to feel more in service to the world this way. Have you always felt this way? Is this a new feeling for you? I mean, in terms of your writing trajectory, because I think it's not true for everyone. I don't think that is
mhm,
a goal
yeah,
for everyone who's writing, well, anything but poetry.
yeah. That's a great question. I don't think it's always been a goal, and I don't think it started being a goal until I started working with Ted Kuzer because I think he's probably the first person I met who showed up in life as he is on the page. Like if you read his poems, it's like, oh, this is a gentle, generous, precise, kind man who's writing these poems. And then you meet him, and that's also true. I mean, he's also very humorous too. He has a great sense of humor, and I think that does come across in the poems sometimes. But I think he was the first person who kind of showed me the power of that, and how when you do show up in that way, both on the page and in person, that clarity, presence, authenticity can then permit others to do the same or even encourage others to do the same. Like there was one time I think he was coming to a reading of mine and I was a little nervous and not in a very good place in life at that point. I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. And he came up to me beforehand and was kind of joking with me, like, young man, will you help me find a book or something like that? And his presence alone and just like chatting with him for a few minutes brought me back into myself. And I think that was the moment I realized it's sort of like that tension we were talking about earlier, the contrast between the state I was in and then how I felt after that. And so I don't know, I'm just kind of speaking from the heart here, but I think what has come to the fore for me in the past few years is to try to have, no separation between me and the poem I'm writing. And I think you're very good at this. I think you do this all the time because you do it every day. Every day is an exercise in showing up for you with your daily poem practice. But it's become more and more of a priority, I think, because I just think there's a real power in not having a discrepancy between who you are in the world and how you are in your writing and on the page, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking, I mean, I had never thought about this before. I only started thinking about it when you, or at least not in this exact way. Um, but it is making me think that one of the blessings of it is that I'll say, when I go back and read my own work, um, there's a mirroring, but more than that, there's oh, yes, like a recognition, especially if it's something from years ago. And
Mm,
I can immediately re-inhabit that space, and then be curious of what I knew then that I don't know now.
mm,
Or what do I know now that I didn't know then? And have this kind of conversation with that part of me that was doing everything she could in that moment to show up. I know she was.
mm.
I trust that. I mean, I
Right,
know that about myself. And the gift then that it is to the self to to be able to have that relationship over time with your own voice and your own
mm,
awareness, how it changes, because it does change quite a bit.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it seems important um, to just show up as wholly and fully as you can whenever you're writing something or creating something, so that I think then when you read it later or share it with the world or re-inhabit it, you will know and others will know, like, oh, this is a person who showed up as fully as they could in that moment. Like, we all might have shown up in different ways, but that person showed up completely as themselves
Mhm.
and who they are in that moment. And I think it's a really powerful practice. I love going back into my old journals and reading what I wrote and finding poems that maybe were not ready to be shared, but now feel more ready because there's some kind of clarity or some kind of growth that's happened. But it's a lot of energy to re-inhabit
Oh,
a
yeah.
past self, right? It's like being possessed or something.
The other thing that I noticed today actually was I was recording poems for ritual. I'd have a little um, an app that I put poems on every day, and I was recording in a bunch today, and I realized that I had quite a few poems that were talking about an inner such and such, right? My inner firefighter, my inner second grader, my inner and I actually, this is something that I love, just Walt Whitman, we contain multitudes. And I do think that poetry is really good at helping us touch these these many different voices that are, all these different, I think we show up as whole as we can, but let's be clear that we also have there are so many ways, that we are in the world. There's the inner fixer, and the inner, critic, and the inner, all these different parts of ourselves, the compassionate part and the most, whatever they are. And I love the way that poetry seems to allow for a witnessing perspective that
Mhm.
that somehow helps us see both this one piece of ourselves which can take center stage for a moment, but somehow the poem, I think the voice of the poem or the voice of the poet, this larger self, the big S self, instead of the little self, has that perspective, that spaciousness, that mm, ability to see, oh, there you are,
Mm,
part of Rosemary who wants to fix everything,
right.
and see it as just a part of the whole,
Mm,
as opposed to, oh, that's all of me. So how valuable that is, I think, in a writing practice.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because we do contain multitudes and we are made of parts. There's a whole theory in psychology called parts theory, right? That
I've
we're
just
all
learned
these
about
different
this.
parts.
Yeah, Amrita wrote to me about it the other day. She was like,
Mm,
oh, oh,
nice.
IFS, I think is what she called it, internal family
Mhm.
system or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think I agree. I think because of the way poetry works, it can sort of isolate this moment when a part of us is showing up. And so it seems like the job of the poet is to show up completely and just be really present to that. And I think for me, this relates to joy because, so often in my past, I know that I've had a barrier between myself and, just feeling joyful or playful or whimsical in the moment because I was trying to be something else. So it goes back to that piece of belonging, right? Like trying to belong to this group or trying to, belong to this particular energy, the rushed energy of trying to get everything done, or how will it appear if I, crouch down on the sidewalk and I'm taking a picture of this dandelion with like, a little droplet held inside of it. Um, the importance of just being playful and being true to whatever moment is
Hmm.
arising just then
Hmm.
and whatever part of ourselves is kind of coming to the surface. That seems so key to me in finding a lot of joy also in a creative practice, just allowing whoever wants to show up in that moment and not censoring yourself. So I'm not surprised that you have all these poems that have, the inner this or the inner that. That makes absolute sense.
Hmm. I hadn't planned on reading this poem, James, but so much of what you just said makes me think about this poem that touches maybe on playfulness, that little inner part that wants to get things right, uh, what that has to do with joy. Just a second, let me see. Oh, yeah, here we go. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I would like to be, there's a part of me that's really perfectionistic and can really uh, be super organized. And there's another part of me that's not like that at all. And so this is practicing KonMari. I don't know if anybody else has read Marie Kondo's book about how one of what she recommends, of course, is that you clean it all out. And this is my experience with that. Practicing KonMari, I did it exactly as Marie Kondo said. I removed everything from my closets and drawers and touched each thing, every sock, every shirt, every shoe, and I asked each item, do you bring me joy? Joy, it turns out, likes many clothes: long scarves, wide necklines, black pants, long knit dresses, and tall leather boots, secondhand cashmere sweaters, and many gardening gloves. And all the while I touched my clothes, I did as Marie said. I visualized the life I want, which is apparently a life in which my closet is full of black pants and scarves and tall leather boots, a life in which I talk to my clothes and smile as they whisper back to me, joy, joy, joy.
They
Yeah,
don't want to be separated from each other either.
apparently not.
That's
Apparently not.
great. I love that. Yeah, I mean that's just an illustration of being true to yourself and your nature,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry,
Like
Marie Kondo, it didn't work out quite like you might suggested.
right,
Oh, hi, Joan May. Hey, read us another poem, James.
absolutely. Well, I think I'll share this one. I know some folks here have maybe heard this as I've been out on the road sharing poems, but we were talking about how joy can happen in small ways and joy can happen when it's just you. And so I wrote this poem because I was meditating on the joy I felt at just seeing this volunteer sunflower in the yard one day last summer. It just brought me so much joy. And I think it's important to say that this poem was written out of a place of grief, and like the joy was also just so present and so real at the same time. So this one is called Sunflower, and it begins with a quote that probably a lot of you have heard of, Mary Oliver's. And she says, "Joy is not made to be a crumb," in her poem, Don't Hesitate. So I argue with her just ever so slightly in this poem. It's fun to argue with people that you would never really, really argue with. Just push things forward a little bit. So this is Sunflower. Joy is not made to be a crumb, Mary Oliver once wrote. But isn't that how it often begins? One crumb of attention, then another and another, until you're able to follow the trail to the volunteer sunflower you hadn't noticed, blooming beside the garden. Volunteer, we say, meaning no human hand nestled that seed in the ground, though the same could be said of joy too, which seems to spring up out of nowhere, like the face of this flower the French call tournesol, meaning turn toward the sun. And don't we each carry a sun in our chests that tells us where to turn, where it's warm, where something bright has struggled up out of the earth and is now calling our name?
Mm, yeah. Don't we each have an inner sun?
Yes, it's an inner sun.
There it is.
Although I'm pretty sure I probably, I know Terry Kirby Erickson has a poem. Actually, she has a book, I think, that's called The Sun in My Chest.
Oh.
So I probably lifted that image from her. And then I think I have used that idea of the inner sun probably one too many times in my poems, but I can't get over it.
Keep
I
using it.
think it's true.
There it is. May we have many, many, many inner suns. May they continue to bless us.
Yeah.
I'm struck in your poem by this theme of where is the effort or not effort, right? That the seed hasn't been planted by human hands. Now we call it a volunteer, but and I think about this a lot, and I even thought about it in our theme title, regenerating joy, as if it's something we're
Mm,
supposed to do.
mm,
Um, generate, Latin word, generate, generous, like genus, create, right? To recreate, bring back joy. And I think that you, maybe me, other people too, have had experiences where it just wasn't even a possibility to think about creating joy. That didn't feel like a possibility. That felt like that sounded like a job to do that I wouldn't be necessarily capable of. If joy showed up, I wasn't going to shut it out, but I wasn't really going to create it either.
mm,
Then I think about this, what is it okay to just I'm going to say it is okay to just let ourselves be wherever we are. It's okay to not be in joy at the moment.
mm,
If it isn't here, it isn't here.
mhm,
Regenerating joy almost sounds maybe like a command, or like you're supposed to be joyful. Well,
mm,
what if you aren't? And now you're going to beat yourself up for not being joyful. So I'm just thinking about then the organic joy that comes from you seeing this volunteer sunflower, right? How the sunflower itself was this thing that happened with no effort, and the joy that you felt came with no effort. And
Mm,
this invitation then to just let it show up as it does, as opposed to feeling like it's something we're supposed to create.
yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for touching on that too. I mean, it's almost like it would be more accurate to say self-generating joy or, just
Mhm.
automatic joy or something like that, something along those terms, because that is, I feel like, how it often works. And sometimes I have a lot of poems about this, as I've been working through the last year of grief, that there are a lot of these small joys that in the moment maybe I'm not even able to feel them, or I wasn't able to feel them as joy, but they gave me something,
Mhm.
like some glimpse of like, oh, there's a little bit of something there. So I know that joy is still possible,
Yeah.
even if I'm not in it.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we can't be in it, and there are plenty of times with, personal pain and certainly global pain where we may not be able to inhabit joy in that particular moment. But if we can at least know, if we can come upon something, I want to say and feel like a little bit of wonder, a little bit of awe, or a little bit of like, "Ah," that's just a slight disruption of where we are, then I think that can lead to joy, or
Mhm.
it can at least promise us that joy is waiting on the other side. That's how it works for me anyway. I shouldn't speak for others, but yeah, it's joy for no reason.
Joy for no and just to know, it's so interesting how I can get hung up on how much, right? A little bit of joy. Could we have more? Could it be more joy?
Right.
Just noticing. Um, uh, um, I pulled out a poem about, all right, enoughness, and joy. And I was thinking about, uh, well, I think I'll read the poem and then maybe just say a little bit about it. But I was visiting my mom in Georgia in March. And all right, this is Lessons from a Small Bush. Because it brings her enormous joy, this pink petaled flowering quince that grows just outside my mother's back door, I long to give her 1,000 such quince bushes, all of them long blooming, voluptuous, thornless, all of them lining her walk. Though the other part of me wants to honor how it takes only one plant to bring her such elation. I am instantly stunned with the wisdom of enoughness, astonished again at how praise needs nothing more than a crumb. There's our crumb. Somehow, letting go of 1,000 imaginary quince bushes floods me with an emptiness so great, I fall more wildly in love with a single pink flower and the luck drunk awe of my mother.
Mm. Luck drunk awe. Wow.
It takes so little.
Mhm.
And how human is it to be like, oh, then I want to give it you more. When it was just one quince bush, it's just one
Mm.
sunflower, it's just, one bluebell in a plastic pot. It really does take so little
Yeah.
to spark joy. Can we trust that? And I think our relationship to enough, I think that's a big issue for, well, for everyone in the 20th century, but especially for America,
Mhm. Yeah.
21st century. I'm back in.
I was thinking, are we still in the 20th century?
I'm
Sometimes
like,
it feels like we're still in the 20th century. Sometimes it feels like we haven't advanced quite enough. But um, but yeah, the enoughness, I think of that all the time with work, and when you're blessed like I am, like you are, to do work you love, and knowing when enough is enough. And sometimes it's hard, because that is also saying like, you know, this is almost too much joy, it's and that's a good problem to have, but maybe it's still a problem sometimes, depending on where you are. Yeah, just the enoughness. Like, I know we do so often turn into like acquisitive beings, like, oh, how can I collect more of this? How can I create more of this? But I think we're saying, and other folks here are echoing, like it cannot be contrived, it cannot be created or destroyed in a way, that it exists on its own. Um, but it is also a mystery. I think that's why I mention it 77 times in my book. Still trying to
Maybe
figure it out.
you should aim for, 200 times in your next book.
Yes, yes, that is something to aim for.
Or is 77 enough?
It's probably enough.
There I was reaching for more.
Yeah.
I saw a note, Nancy writes, thanks for sharing a beautiful connection moment with your mom. Uh, on another note, uh, friends, my friend Sherry and I have what's called the Secret Agents of Change, and we're in the middle of a mission, a secret agent mission right now, where we're offering love to, I see a few of the people who are in secret agents, by the way, who are here with us. And what we're offering love to any kind of mother-ish figure, and they're very complex layers of Mother's Day and all that it brings up for people. At any rate, you don't have to be a secret agent of change to do it, but just noticing that there are, as it's arriving, as we're coming close, that one of the premises of secret agents of change is doing surreptitious acts of kindness. And Deborah had written earlier something about how she her mother had taught her to leave baskets. It's a May Day thing. Do you leave a basket of flowers or a basket of
Mm,
and sweets and candy on somebody's doorstep, and anonymously? And I love that that's a part of May Day, to leave anonymous gifts,
mm,
and the sweetness then that comes from believing and the joy that comes from believing that somebody out there cares about me. If you've ever gotten an anonymous gift, you know how wonderful that is. You're like, as my friend Sherry often points out, then you're suddenly like, was it you? Was it you? It could have been anybody who
mm,
did this sweet thing. And we start to believe the best of other people because we don't know who it was that did it. And suddenly everybody
mm,
feels responsible for generosity and bringing joy. So I love that about this day, about May Day, that there is this historic underpinning of generosity and secret kindness.
mm. Beautiful. Yeah. Gave me a chill. I got a chill as you were talking about it. I don't know what that was. But yeah, what a great practice. And I think it just makes me think, how can we how can we leave anonymous gifts for each other? What are the things that we can do? And um, I guess it's not always anonymous, but it feels like sometimes writing a poem is just this little act of laying something at the doorstep, because you never know where it's going to travel or which doorstep it might end up on. And someone will find it who doesn't even know who you are, and just really be touched by that.
Mm. What's a
Yeah.
recent poem that landed on your doorstep that touched you?
So, yeah. Hmm. I guess I was surprised I didn't know it, but this poem, it's a longer poem called The Facts of Life by Patrick Otuma. That starts off, very bluntly, that you were born and you will die, and it just sort of goes off on this litany of, you know, things we can't control, that there will be love, that there will be difficulty, and, just very in a very kind of blunt voice. And it just really landed for me in a large way. And so I've been carrying it with me and, seeing what it brings up.
Mhm. Mm.
What about for you?
Oh gosh, I was just thinking, oh no, he's going to ask me a question. Um, there's one I'm just dying to remember the name from Vox Populi, and it was two poems by this fellow, and I can't remember his name. I feel so bad. I feel it was like Mike Young or something like this. I'm embarrassed to not remember. And they were so tender and
Mm,
sensual and soft, and um maybe I'll find the link to it and I'll send it, we can send it out. So since
yeah.
unfortunately I can't remember the name, and I'm often like this, I can be so watercolorish instead of, crystal clear photo. But my memory of the two poems, both of them, there were two poems, and I just felt so held by the one of them had to do with, slipping between the sheets with someone else, and but there was the whole outside world was brought in too, and it was, I don't
Hmm.
know. I'm doing
Well,
a terrible job of describing it,
I'll
friend,
look
but
forward to reading them.
I'll send out links to them. But just today, discussing uh, the laundry poem, Clothing,
Hmm.
was such a joy by Margaret Hass. Do you know how to say her name? Is it Hass or Hessa or
It's Hassie.
Hassie?
Mhm.
Uh, just reading this poem about that I pointed out earlier in the path to kindness, and here she is doing laundry, and she ends with these lines, but I could find it pretty quick. I stack up the items, then hug everything to my chest, smelling the warm, clean cotton that covers the ones I love. I just fell into those last lines and loved how sensual they were, and
Mhm.
they brought me so much joy. And I don't know Margaret Hassey. Hassey, is that, did I say it right now?
Mhm.
Forgive me, Margaret Hassey, if you're here, if I'm not sure how to say your name. But now I do.
Yeah, she's a Minnesota poet.
Yeah. Will you read us another poem?
Sure. Yeah. I was trying to decide. Yeah, I'll read this one, which is, I think, also about a small moment. But I think it's, these terms that we often use just get so bundled up together for me. Like, what's the difference between mindfulness, presence, joy? All these different ways of talking about it. And so this is a poem that kind of combines all of those, and it's called Selah. After black clouds swirled in the sky and rain made a lake of the driveway, the early evening turned so quiet I could hear suds dissolving in the sink from the sponge I'd just squeezed out, bubbles popping, draining away. And I dropped so easily into myself like a rock sinking through clear water. The scribe writing the story of my life must have decided to insert the word Selah that appears over and over in the Psalms, and which we can only guess is an invitation to the reader to pause here in the text. Leave room between this breath and the next for the sound of that still small voice rising up in you.
Hmm. Salam.
Mm. Yeah, so there's this word that appears again and again in the Psalms, and we don't really precisely know what it means, but it's just this pause, just this moment of kind of taking stock. Um, and I feel like sort of I was saying earlier, that so much of the joy that I feel comes out of those moments of pausing, even if it's not writing it down, although that's part of the process usually for me is trying to, I wanted to say capture, but that's such a terrible way of putting it. Like hold on to, cradle the moment a little bit longer, not capture. But I do think there's still part of that acquisitive, piece of ourselves that like we want to hold on to our moments. We don't want to let them go. And especially if been a moment of joy or a moment of deep presence, it's like, let me write this down. Let me try to create a formula so I can have it again. Um, but it just arises, it just arises on its own.
Well, and like you say, you use this word spaciousness, right? That a small pause invites a vastness to enter this moment, right? And I think that there's something so true about that, about how to touch it for a moment is to touch it for an eternity, right?
Mm,
In this invitation, then just a little bit of space can do so much more than just create a little space. It has this opening effect, I think. I mean, I notice this in myself when there's a pause. I've become actually much more aware of it, James, in my own writing.
mm,
Even thinking about a blank page and what I used to call stuck as Salah, right? This moment of nothing happening, of spaciousness coming in before the words come in, right? The silence before the words. It used to scare me like there was something wrong. Like I was supposed to be just, aren't I supposed to be like writing like crazy? Aren't I supposed to be just channeling, downloading all those poems as opposed to, oh, this chance to inhabit spaciousness, this
mm,
chance to be with this blank page, to be blank myself.
mm.
It's just remarkable to me that I thought it was a problem. I really did. And what
Yeah,
a gift it feels like now. Salah, this pause, this blank, this spaciousness.
yeah, yeah. Beth was pointing out savor was a word you've used before, James, and that is true. That is one of my favorite words, savor. Um, yeah, the writer of Charlotte's Web, he has a quote that I like quite a lot. It's something like, every day I awaken torn between the urge to save the world or to savor it, something like that. And it's like, well, can't we do both? And why does it have to be one or the other? Um, and I think in a very real way, we do save our world, when we stop to savor it, because like what you're saying, that little bit of space invites more and more space in the same way that a crumb of joy, even so small that we might not call it joy, reminds us that the larger joy is possible and almost lays the groundwork for that larger joy to come later. um, and even like, a small version of connecting with the self, even if it still feels like, the little self, like opens us to a sense of larger self that's not just us.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what you were saying.
That
Yeah.
blurring of the boundaries. Yeah, absolutely, James.
Yeah.
Mhm. Um, I wanted to share a poem about, oh, Robbie says, will you give a prompt about spaciousness? Robbie, ask us what the prompt might be about.
Mm.
Maybe we can offer one. Um,
Well, it
I
could be finding joy in something ordinary, like a chore.
um, which, I think the first thing is just noticing it's possible.
Mhm.
It's even possible for that to happen.
Yeah.
And I wrote actually just yesterday, I wrote a poem about my mother making me tea. And when I read the poem, I sobbed. I didn't just cry a little bit.
Mm.
I full on just ugly cried, just couldn't
Yeah.
stop. And it was because as I read I had understood it as I wrote the poem, just how much love my mom put into every single little act, right? The
Mm.
turning on of the water, the choosing of the tea bag, the fact that she even had my favorite soy milk in her refrigerator because she would go to the store and look for it for a half hour and make sure that I had it,
Yeah.
when I got to her house, and just having it ready so that when I woke up it was ready for me. I just thinking of all the love and intention in that.
Mm.
Oh my good, full waterworks. So noticing when someone else does it, I think can invite it into
Yeah.
experience, into our own awareness of, oh, I could make a cup of tea like this for someone else. I could fold clothes like this for someone else
Mhm.
and wash the dishes for someone. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, I mean, of course, you're able to do this because you are who you are, but not everyone would necessarily pause like, oh, she has my favorite soy milk. Oh, she had the perfect Earl Grey tea with the bergamot is like just so redolent. And like there's a sensory joy in all of that, in like the actual things that go into the tea. But I think there's also a sensory joy in like, oh, there's another human being, human body, especially a parent, a mother that cares enough about me to do all of this. And there's like a sensual joy that comes from that connection
Mhm.
to another person. And I would suggest that's why you ugly cried.
That's why I ugly cried. So going back then to Robbie's question, maybe thinking about someone who loves you, who's done something for you, that you could feel all that intention and kindness. You could feel that generosity and devotion. And then to notice, is it possible for me to do that in this mowing the lawn, in this, you know, cutting out the catnip out of the garden, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, I wanted to share this one about, I suppose, kind of a resisting joy, like not really thinking it's possible, but going along with it anyway.
Mm.
And so our friends had given us tickets to go to a concert, my husband and I, and it almost felt like a chore to have to go to this concert. They had great seats and they weren't going to make it, and I was like, oh, but I could just stay home. But we went, and this is The Broken Heart Goes Dancing. Give me a night made of strings, a night that is plucked and strummed and bowed and picked, a night with a driving, ecstatic music, and nothing to do but be danced by the night. As if each string of dobro and fiddle and bass is attached to an arm, a foot, a hip, to the curling edge of an upper lip. And even the broken heart is tugged from its chair by bronze-coated strings until it's an open and rhythmic thing that beats for the bliss of it, beats for the song of it, beats for the joy swaying, head shaking lift of it, beats because that's what a heart is for. And for hours, the night pulls every string, and the heart beats out more, please, more, please, more.
Mm. That's more goes with what we're talking about, a little bit of joy and we want more. The heart wants more.
And
The heart wants more. The heart wants to give more, receive more. I mean, I think that just makes sense. That's how the human heart works.
because I didn't go looking for joy, right? I went
Mm.
like, oh, do I have to go? There's these, I think that there's this, the invitation then to joy, it takes so little in a way. It takes some small willingness to say, okay, all right, I'll show up. I think that it takes that little, okay, I'll show up. If we can get to that, I think that life itself takes over. I think life
Yes.
itself brings the smallest things. the sunflower, the banjo, and it finds its way in. I think we're hardwired for joy,
Mhm.
and we can stubbornly shut it out. It takes effort to shut it out.
Yeah.
I think the smallest amount, I think back to when my son first died, when Finn first died, how for days, for weeks, I just said okay to everything. Okay. Okay. It was like this little mantra that got me through my days. Everything I did, okay. I opened the door. Okay. I picked up the
Mm.
phone. Okay. I pressed the number. Okay. I think if we can get to okay, then life itself can come in, can
Mm.
can bring the crumb.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, that it is about saying yes to something, even if, like sometimes we do things, it's like, okay, yes, I'll do this, but I don't have to enjoy it. It's like, no, you don't have to force yourself to do anything. All you have to do is say yes, but it's almost like, I love what you're saying because okay is sort of like the crumb of joy.
Mhm.
And that is not maybe yet joy or not fully joy. It's just like I just have this image of a breeze sweeping into the room. It's like, okay, letting it in, not welcoming with open arms, not, meeting fully necessarily, coexisting, like abiding with, something like that.
And not trying to force it, not trying to even create it, not seeking it out. Just that base. It's just that base. Okay. I'll be here. I'll be here right now. Yeah. I think, James, if you read us another poem and then maybe we'll open it up for questions.
Absolutely.
Friends, if this would be a great time to think, if you have a question, you could put it in the Q&A, um, or hold on to your question and wait, and so you can just devote all your attention to James reading.
As you wish. So I'll share this one. I love doing this with you, Rosemary, because it's so much like jazz. Because I had one poem that I picked out to read, and now I want to read a different one. So you just never know what's going to come to the fore. But this is a poem about saying yes, and I think it is about saying yes to sensual joy, even things that might be a little unpleasant. So this is Say Yes, just a little poem. Say yes to suede sandals you slip on to step outside. Yes to sun on your arms, even the pink welt of a mosquito bite rising up to greet you. Say yes to this clump of wild geraniums growing in perpetual shade behind the house through a rip in the forgotten blue tarp. Say yes to tiny pink flowers winking in the dark you move deeper into, so that you may receive their promise. Yes, they say, you too can find ways to thrive, even in those places where the light is scarce.
You too can find ways to thrive in the place where light is scarce. What a promise.
Mm, yeah. And a promise that comes, I think, from really mundane things like the sandals, the sun, the mosquito bite, these very common little wild geraniums. I don't know if folks have them elsewhere, but they grow everywhere and they grow in the cracks of things, and they're just very opportunistic, and the fact that they can grow with so little, I think, reinforces what we've been saying throughout the whole session, which is that it takes so little.
Mhm.
Um, just the ability to be receptive,
Yeah.
to receive.
Yeah. Isn't that what poetry is? I've been thinking this more and more. I've heard myself say it in several classes lately, that We think about poetry as a place to find our voice, and yet I really think poetry is the place we find our ears, or I say ears, but I mean a full body receptivity. And maybe that's what we were saying about earlier, that transparency between who we are and what the poem is, right? And the less filter, the less that's between us and experience. That's a really ecstatic yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think to move through the world more transparently, I think Marie Howe has talked about that with her poetry, like, this desire to be transparent. But it's like not in the sense that I'm see-through and, barely here. It's like to be
It's the cellophane.
right. To be transparent and also fully solid and embodied and right here.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. I'm gonna have to look for that in her poems. I don't, where did you find that? Does it come to mind where you've seen that?
I think I just heard her say it in an interview.
Oh.
Yeah, I
Because I
think.
agree with that so much. Yeah, that transparency, you know, what's how do I not get in the way?
Yeah. She has a poem. I'm gonna blank on the title, and I just came across it recently, but I think it's about getting sober and not, she mentions the pills in the poem and how they were keeping her from being where she was and being there for all of it. So I think that's what brought it to mind, even if she doesn't use those words.
Mhm. Right. So how fully can we show up? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what are the barriers? What are
And
the
what are
things that are keeping us from showing up? Which
oh my goodness.
it doesn't have to be an addiction. It can be just a tendency, just small things, but there are often those things that get in the way.
Oh my gosh, so many. What doesn't get in the way, Jane? A longing to be good, right? That gets in the way more than
Right.
almost anything else. You know, just noticing how to want to be wise, or to want anything gets in the way. Really, wanting gets in the way. Even
Yes,
though I
yes.
believe that wanting is probably one of, I always say it makes us a terrible Buddhist and a fabulous writer, because that longing, that desire really pushes us. It's such a big part of being human, is to want something. Yeah.
I think it's really healthy to want, and a word that you often use, then to adjust once you receive what you get, which is not necessarily what you want or what you expect. Um, I know Brad and I often refer to that, I don't know if it's still your one word mantra
Oh,
to adjust, but we talk about that a lot. Just like, okay, time to adjust. Rosemary's mantra.
You know what I love about adjust? It comes from the same root, Indo-European root, as yoke, like for oxen. And it's the same root for yoga, which is basically thinking about how a yoke tethers, the oxen to something. So to adjust is basically to tether ourselves to the world as it is, which I love this. I
Wow.
love the stories of language. I love all the stories inside of words. And I love that that's the heart of adjusting, is to yoke ourselves to the world. What's here? What's really here? And let ourselves come back into relationship with that, as opposed to what we wish, what we want for,
Mhm.
the wanting.
Well, if it's here, and it's not something that needs to be rejected or turned away from, you might as well yoke yourself to it, especially you know, if you don't have a choice. I think that's true, especially for the unexpected that arises. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think it is also my mantra, spoken or not, whenever I'm writing, which, because I am always looking to surprise myself and to be surprised. And then you adjust. One line comes. I didn't expect that. Adjust, adjust, adjust,
Right,
to
right,
whatever appears.
right, right. This is why I think, I mean, if anybody's ever taken a class with me, I say it every time, but this is why I think it's so important to not think you know where the poem's going to end.
Yeah.
Because then
Yeah.
you can't adjust.
Right.
So that willingness to enter with us, I don't know what'll come, can be a little scary, but then it gives us the chance to adjust, 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 and be surprised and find epiphany and
Mm.
notice, oh, I mean, that's why it's so exciting, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Definitely.
oh, that. This is the way that the poem teaches us and instructs us, and it's- I'm ever thrilled by that. All right, friends, I really have not seen many questions in the Q&A, so I'm just going to invite you, if you would like, if you have a question, please do put it in the, oh, there, we just got one. Can you please post the title of the first poem read so I could try to find it? James, I think that's for you, friend. I missed it while logging in. I would love to read all the poems you shared. You know what? How about we just agree right now that in our follow-up email, James and I
Mhm.
will send the titles of all the poems that we read.
Yep.
Um, well, that's done, Marjorie. Thanks for asking.
Mhm.
And Claire says, oh, Claire says too. Will we get the copies of the poems
Mhm.
you're reading? Hope so. And Lonnie
Yeah.
says, our world is so transactional, it would seem to leave little room for a pause for joy after all. Where is the payoff? Where's the return? Well, I do think we've talked about that. Yes, it takes effort to step outside the transactional life so easily laid on us.
Mm.
Um, James, you want to read Miriam's question? Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah. Does Buddhism or something else influence your poetry? I have been influenced a lot by Buddhism, but I think I'm just influenced by whatever is in front of me, really. So I, read books of by Christian writers. It's all different kinds, and I have my favorites. Mark Nepo is a favorite writer of mine who kind of draws from a lot of different traditions and writes from a very openly spiritual perspective. So I really appreciate his work because he's always just pulling in these different strands that are unexpected. Um, but otherwise, not necessarily. I mean, I'm influenced by my own meditation practice, but I would say that too has been very cobbled together. I practice what I guess would be called insight meditation, but I'm also counting breaths as I'm meditating, usually in sets of four. And so I'm just doing whatever works for me. And I think that, you know, I would encourage everyone to do the same in terms of any sort of spiritual practice. And that is how writing has become part of my spiritual practice because I was not trained in my lovely MFA and PhD programs. I was not trained to make writing a spiritual practice. Such a surprise. So I had to adjust during those programs and then create it for myself, And so writing, meditation, pausing, these are my practices.
Writing, meditation, pausing. Yeah. Me too, actually. I could just say me too, but I've done beautiful retreats with Buddhist teachers, and my own spiritual teacher, Joy Sharp, is she's does satsang and is um, studied and learned. I don't know what the right word is. Practiced, devoted herself to there to Amma. Um, so, but I grew up as a Christian. I think just like you, James, I feel like I've drawn on so many different spiritual teachers and different writers. And I think that the biggest influences are whatever comes in, what's ever coming in, honestly, right now. Kind of like this conversation, just noticing how sweet and easy, James, it is to bounce back and forth. And here's something you said in the poem and it lights something up in me. And that's a great example, I think, of how a poetry practice works is by pulling in what's here, what's here now, what just happened. Poetry is the bridge between that and what's living in here, whatever wonder or question or feeling or thought, and letting poems be the bridge between those two.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that image of the poem as the bridge, because we are reaching out. We're trying to connect, and trying. I think in so many cases, for me at least, because I'm not always writing about something that happened in the moment. Sometimes it doesn't bubble up or come back to me until the morning after, or several days later, maybe even several years later. So I feel like we're trying to connect or even yoke ourselves to the past, the past and the present connected together. Um, Perhaps it's even a way of reaching into the future and kind of bringing that into the poem
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Friends, it'd be a great time to ask a question if you have one. Oh, there are some. Oh, I just hadn't scrolled. Uh, a suggestion, read both poems twice. Thanks, Pauline. Well, in the future, maybe we'll do that. As it is, we'll send you the poems so that you can read them again. And anonymous attendee says, could you please say again the whole name of Marie, whom James quoted? Marie Howe, How.
Ancient. Mhm.
Kathy says, James, how do you collect poems into themes in your beautifully curated collections? I imagine note cards.
Good question. There are no note cards involved, but they, but I'm going through this process again right now for a new book that I'm editing. And it really just involves printing them out and crouching down on the floor and treating them like puzzle pieces and then going through them again and again and seeing which poems are talking with each other. And it's always fascinating to me. Like I don't intend themes to arise like laundry when I'm putting together collections, but in this new one, there's this whole group of poems about flying and flights and planes, and and then there are these other groups of poems that are about butterflies and chrysalis and the process of emerging, and none of it's intentional. It's sort of just like we're talking about right now, listening to the intuition and being really present, like, oh, I really love this poem, something speaks to me, I'm going to hold on to this, and then seeing what ties all these poems together. Maybe you were talking about the larger themes, um, and sometimes those emerge and change over time as well. Like I think with my most recent one, which is The Wonder of Small Things, I really thought that I was putting together a book of poems about mindfulness. And in a way, I was. But what really gathered those poems together was wonder and awe
Mhm.
more than anything else.
Yeah, it reminds me of my friend, I quote all the time, Jack Mueller saying, obey the emerging form. And there it is. It shows up, right? When we give ourselves to it, it continues to unfold.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think I just got that in a deeper way. I've heard you say it a number of times, but I think I just got that in a really deep way. That it is like, maybe it's because we're talking so much about space, pausing, being in the body. And it's like, you can't, it's hard to let the form emerge if you're trying to force it. It's almost impossible, really, right? You have to kind of pull back a little and allow the form to emerge that wants to emerge. It's much harder. You can certainly arrive with your own ideas, and they are not necessarily what's going to emerge.
Uh,
Yeah.
someone's asking, what is your favorite Mark Nepo book?
Do you know his work? Do you have a favorite book of his?
I have favorite poems. I don't have a favorite,
Hmm.
but actually, I should say that his book, The Book of Awakening, saved my life. It
Yeah.
truly,
Yeah.
truly saved my life. There was a year I don't know how I would have. I wait. I'd wake up and think I can make it through today because I can read that. Whatever he wrote for today is going to help me meet this day. It was that desperate,
Yeah.
and I think it. Then I went years without reading his book, and now I dabble in that book, now and then I'll go, oh
Mhm.
yes. But there was the year when I would not have lived without that book,
Mm.
8, 10 years ago.
No, I didn't know that. Yeah, I would say begin with the Book of Awakening. It's probably his most well-known book. You can probably find it used too because it was a very, very popular book, still is. Um, and it's a day book. It starts off with a quote and a really resonant kind of exploration of a story or a moment from his life, or he survived cancer, so he writes about that journey. Um, but I would say beyond that book, you almost just cannot go wrong. I mean, The One Life We're Given is beautiful, 7,000 Ways to Listen. He has a new book that's coming out this summer, all about friendship, which is also really beautiful. And The Exquisite Risk, Robin is saying, yeah, he's just an amazing person. I know someone earlier, I know Amrita said she also worked with the Book of Awakening, but someone said they attended one of his weekend retreats. And I highly recommend a webinar or retreat if you can attend one, because he's just he is someone else who shows up on the page as he shows up in person. And you're sort of amazed because how he shows up on the page is pretty wonderful and amazing. But in person, and interacting, like he's that's just who he is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time, friends. I had a little quote from Rumi that I was thinking about for tonight. I thought I'd maybe start with it, but so maybe we'll end with it. And maybe we have time just for a second, James, to talk about it. But the quote is this, and like so many other poems, I end up putting it into a song so I can remember it. The hurt you embrace becomes joy. Joy, call it to your arms where it can change. The hurt you embrace becomes joy. Joy, call it to your arms where it can change. That's Coleman Barks's version of silkworms. The hurt you embrace becomes joy. Call it to your arms where it can change. Sometimes I agree with that, and sometimes
Yeah.
I don't.
I think when you're in pain, it's hard to accept and receive that. I believe that too most days. I definitely believe that any feeling will change, and even if the pain stays with you, um, the feeling that accompanies it will change. And people have argued with me about that. I'll post a poem on social media and like talk about how no feeling is final, as Rilke said. A feeling will always change. That's not true. That's not, people always want to push back against it, but it's like just sit and see. I'm not saying it will get instantly better. It may get worse, actually.
It could get
It
worse.
could get worse, but I think often, that little bit of change, again, with what we were saying earlier, that transition, that tension of like, oh, I felt this before and now I feel this, which is different, allows at least the possibility for joy, which almost, I want to say, is its own kind of joy.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, beautifully said. Something will change.
It will change.
Call it to your arms. I almost wonder if it's just as simple as okay. I feel like that puts a little pressure on us to try and transform our pain. But I don't think that's really on us. I think that it'll happen in its own time and we can show up for it.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thanks to everyone with us tonight.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much for holding the space and just being wonderful. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll send you the link and we'll send you all the poems.
We'll send you everything we have.
We'll just keep sending it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye.